I first of all thought I should say a little bit about myself so that you know where I come from in these things. You can hear that I'm not Irish, I hope. But I've lived in Ireland since January 1967, so 43 years. And I went there to work in the Department of German and was successively junior lecturer, and senior lecturer over that 10-year period. What's important about that is that I came to the kind of things that have subsequently given me a reason for living and whatnot, not from the common applied linguistics perspective of EFL in Europe, but from foreign languages within an English-speaking context. So that means that I've always been slightly to one side of the applied linguistics mainstream in Europe, and of course more connected to school-based language teaching and learning in spirit, if not in fact. I did my own undergraduate degree at Oxford, and it was fairly traditional and old-fashioned, and it was in German and French. I think the only thing that ensured that I knew more German and French when I left than when I first came there was the fact that they did expect us to read more or less the whole of French and German literature. Because everything else contributed very little to the development of productive proficiency, whether in speaking or in writing. And when I arrived in Dublin, I discovered that the approaches to language teaching, to call it that, were exactly the same as I'd had to cope with as a student in Oxford. But there wasn't this redeeming feature of being expected to read the whole of literature. The students were given about 8 texts to read a year, and most of them were available in translation. So that one was seriously concerned about what might be coming out at the end. And that got me thinking and probably complaining about language teaching and learning at the university. And it was what lay behind the fact that in 1977 I was seconded from the German department to set up this new Centre for Language and Communication Studies. That had 3 functions. First of all, to establish a technological base of support for language learning and teaching in the university. That enabled us to get involved in self-access facilities and resources, and in due course gave us quite a useful basis for developing an institution-wide language program. But we also were involved in a lot of research. The idea was that we should support what we were doing practically by research, and that out of that we should develop a teaching role. And slightly to my surprise, I was then appointed director of CLCS and remained in that function until 2005, when we had restructuring in the university, which didn't lead to anything very much. But for the last 3 years I was on the payroll. I was head of this school that comprised CLCS and a Centre for Deaf Studies, which we'd set up a few years previously, and Clinical Speech and Language Studies, which is Irish speech therapy. Already, Jackie has mentioned my principal research focus, and the few words that I'm going to say now in a very compressed way about my orientation to learning and teaching languages are important because they really have determined the kind of contribution I've tried to make to the Council of Europe's work.